The transport shuttle touched down on Krell 9, with all the grace of a drunk elephant doing ballet, and Brother Marcus stepped out into what could only be described as a war zone, having a particularly bad day. Smoke billowed from approximately 17 different directions. Explosions provided a rhythmic background percussion, and somewhere in the distance, someone was screaming about honor and vengeance in a language that sounded like a garbage disposal eating silverware. Commander Wexler stood on the landing pad with his forearms crossed in what Marcus had learned was the Krellian equivalent of extreme annoyance. His scales were a deep purple, which according to the cultural briefing Marcus had skimmed during the flight, meant he was either angry, constipated, or both. "You are the human diplomat," Wexler said flatly. It was not a question, it was an accusation. "Brother Marcus." "Yes." Marcus bowed slightly, his simple brown robes dusty from the landing. He carried nothing but a wooden walking stick and a smile that suggested he either knew something nobody else did or had completely lost his mind. "Pleased to meet you, Commander." Wexler SI stalks swiveled to examine Marcus from every angle, searching for hidden weapons, tech implants, or literally anything that might justify Earth sending this particular human to a war that had been raging for 47 years. He found nothing. Just robes. "And that stick. Where's your weapon?" Wexler demanded. "Do not have one. Your armor. Also no. Your tactical support team. Just me, I'm afraid." Wexler's scales shifted to a concerning shade of crimson. "Your planet sent a monk to our war zone unarmed. The Galactic Council requested Earth's finest negotiator, and you people sent a man in pajamas with a stick." "Well," Marcus said cheerfully, "the Council did say they wanted someone who thinks outside the box, and I have never been very good with boxers. Bit claustrophobic, Rila." Captain Torin, Wexler's second-in-command, and someone who looked like he had not slept since the war started, made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. "We are doomed. The human has a death wish, and he's going to get us all killed. I promise you, I am quite invested in staying alive," Marcus said, watching another explosion paint the horizon orange. "Lovely sunset you have here. Very apocalyptic. Really sets the mood." Wexler pinched the bridge of his snout, a gesture that apparently translated across species. "The Zephyrons will shoot you on sight. They shoot everything on sight. That is literally their entire military strategy. Sounds efficient. It is not a compliment." Marcus planted his walking stick and gazed out at the battlefield with the serenity of someone observing a particularly interesting cloud formation. "Commander, I have read the reports. 47 years of fighting over treaty violations. Thousands dead, economies in shambles, and nobody, in all that time, has actually tried talking to each other." "We tried talking," Torin muttered. "They responded with missiles. And you responded to their missiles with bigger missiles." "Yes. Obviously. Well, there is your problem. Terrible conversation skills all around." Marcus turned back to them, and despite the explosions and the death and the general atmosphere of military despair, his expression remained unnervingly calm. "I would like to visit the front lines tomorrow." Both Krellians stared at him. "The front lines," Wexler repeated slowly, as if speaking to a child or someone suffering from acute head trauma. "Yes, where the fighting is. I assume that is where I will find people who actually know what is happening." "What is happening is war." Wexler's voice rose to a pitch that made several nearby soldiers duck for cover. "War does not require visiting. War requires not dying." "Counterpoint," Marcus said, raising one finger. "How can I end a war I have not seen?" Torin laughed again, that same broken sound. "End the war. He thinks he can end the war. Human, species, with better weapons, better strategies, and actual survival instincts have tried for 47 years. What makes you think you can do anything?" Marcus smiled, and there was something in that smile that made both officers pause. It was not arrogance exactly, more like someone holding cards nobody else knew existed. "Because," Brother Marcus said simply, "I read the entire treaty." But versions. In the original language, last night, the way he said it made it sound like this should mean something. The way Vexler and Torin looked at each other suggested they had no idea what that meant, but also that they were starting to suspect the human might not be completely insane, just mostly insane. Which, on Krell 9, was probably an improvement. The armored transport rumbled toward the front lines with Marcus sitting peacefully in the back, hands folded, apparently meditating while surrounded by heavily armed soldiers who looked at him like he was a bomb that might explode into poetry at any moment. Vexler sat across from him, watching, waiting for the human to crack. They always did. The reality of war had a way of breaking the naive. So, Vexler said, because awkward silence was apparently worse than conversation with a madman, what exactly does a human monk do? Pray. Contemplate. Write sad poems about leaves. Marcus opened one eye. Train, mostly. Train for what? Spiritual enlightenment. That, and dodging fruit. The transport hit a pothole. Several soldiers checked their weapons nervously. Dodging fruit, Vexler repeated. The Monastery of Infinite Patience has very specific training methods, Marcus explained, as if this were perfectly normal. Year 1, you learn to meditate while the senior monks throw apples at your head. Year 2, they upgrade to melon. By year 5, they are launching durians at terminal velocity. Torin, who was manning the forward gun, turned around. Why? Teaches focus, under pressure, also reflexes. Very important for a pacifist to know how to not be hit by things. Marcus smiled at the memory. I got very good at it. Made it through the entire pineapple gauntlet without a single concussion. Your planet is insane, Vexler muttered. We prefer creatively practical. The transport lurched as something exploded nearby. The soldiers tensed, weapons raised, scanning for threats. Marcus did not even blink. He just shifted his weight slightly, perfectly balanced despite the chaos. The language training was worse, though. Marcus continued conversationally. 47,000 languages, including dead ones. Do you know how boring it is to learn a language nobody speaks anymore? Very boring. Monumentally boring, but necessary. Why would you possibly need to know dead languages? Torin asked, despite himself getting drawn into the insanity. Because, sometimes, the most important documents are written in them. Marcus looked out the window at the scarred landscape rolling past, and sometimes, people forget what words used to mean. Language evolves. Context shifts. What meant one thing 50 years ago might mean something entirely different now. Another explosion, closer this time. The transport swerved. Marcus swayed with it like a reed in wind, never losing balance. Vexler leaned forward. And this aggressive empathy thing. Ah, yes. That is the monastery's specialty. Most people think empathy is about being nice. It is not. It is about understanding someone so completely that you can see exactly what they need to hear, even if they do not want to hear it, especially if they do not want to hear it. The transport broke through into the active combat zone, and suddenly, they were in the middle of it. Plasma fire streaked overhead. Explosions cratered the ground. The radio crackled with panicked voices reporting casualties and coordinates and imminent death. Marcus stood up, walking to the window with his hands behind his back, watching the carnage like a tourist observing street performers. Fascinating, he murmured. Both sides are using identical tactics, same firing patterns, same defensive positions, same mistakes. What mistakes, Vexler? Demanded, standing beside him. All of them? Marcus pointed to a Krellian position. You fire on them. They return. Fire you fire back. Neither side ever stops to ask why you are firing in the first place. It is like two people screaming at each other in different languages, getting angrier that neither understands, never once thinking to find a translator. The transport stopped at a forward command post. As soon as the doors opened, a Zephyron artillery shell shrieked overhead and detonated 50 meters away, showering them with dirt and debris. Marcus stepped out, brushed dust off his robes, and looked around with interest. "Oh, good. Both sides are in range. This will save time." "Get down," Torin yelled, diving behind cover. Marcus did not get down. He walked forward, toward no man's land between the two armies, and for a moment, both sides stopped shooting. Just stopped, because there was a human in robes walking across a battlefield like he was taking a morning stroll through a park. "Is he suicidal?" a Krellian soldier whispered. "No," Vexler said slowly, watching Marcus wave cheerfully at a Zephyrin sniper position. "I think he might actually be brilliant, or completely insane. Possibly both." Marcus reached the middle of the battlefield, planted his walking stick in the churned earth, and cupped his hands around his mouth. "Hello!" he shouted in perfect Zephyrin. "Lovely day for not dying. Would anyone like to talk instead of shooting?" The silence that followed was the kind that makes career soldiers deeply uncomfortable. Then a voice from the Zephyrin line, hesitant. "Talk about what?" Marcus grinned. "How about why we are all here? I read both treaties. All of them. I have questions." Vexler's scales went pale. He is negotiating, in the middle of a firefight, without authorization, without backup, with nothing but audacity and a wooden stick. "Is it working?" Torin asked. They watched as Marcus sat down cross-legged in the dirt, apparently willing to wait. "I have no idea," Vexler admitted, "but I am terrified to find out." The neutral bunker smelled like recycled air, old rage, and the particular kind of tension that precedes either breakthrough peace or spectacular violence. Marcus had somehow, through a combination of persistent cheerfulness and making both sides feel guilty about shooting an unarmed monk, convinced the leadership of two armies that had been trying to kill each other for 47 years to sit in the same room. General Cross arrived first, flanked by a dozen guards, all 7 feet of his Krellian bulk, radiating the kind of fury that could melt steel. His ceremonial battle armor bore the scars of 1,000 engagements, each one a story of loss and determination. High Chancellor Zarina entered from the opposite door, her Zephyron crystalline features sharp enough to cut glass, her entourage equally armed and equally hostile. Her people had lost 3 generations to this war. The hatred in her eyes could have powered a small star. They saw each other and immediately reached for weapons. "Gentlemen, lady, please," Marcus said from the head of the table, where he had somehow positioned himself, despite being the least important person in the room by any military metric. He was pouring tea from a battered kettle he had found in the bunker's kitchen. "I made tea. It is terrible. We should all suffer equally. I will kill you where you stand." "Cross," Zarina hissed. Her voice, like crystal chimes, played in a minor key of pure malice. "You could try, war criminal." Cross growled back. "Your people violated the treaty first. You started this. We did nothing. You were the aggressors." The treaty states that you actually," Marcus interrupted, sipping his awful tea without flinching. "The treaty states several different things depending on which version you read, which is interesting. Is it not?" Both leaders turned to glare at him, united for the first time in decades by their shared desire to make the monk shut up. Marcus smiled serenely and gestured to the chairs. "Please, sit. I promise this will be worth your time. Probably. Hopefully. Well, at minimum it will be educational." Vexler and Torin stood by the door, hands on their weapons, absolutely certain this would end with someone's death. Smart money was on the monk. After a tense moment, Cross sat. Then Zarina. Neither took their eyes off the other. The guards on both sides looked ready to start the war again right here in this room. "So," Marcus said brightly, pulling out 2 data pads. "I spent 72 hours reading everything about this war. Battle reports, casualty lists, economic analysis, propaganda from both sides. 47 years of documentation. Do you know what I found most interesting? That you are about to die," Serena offered coldly. "Besides that, I found that every single engagement, every battle, every skirmish, started because one side or the other claimed the other had violated the Treaty of Shared Prosperity. Yes, grudging nods from both leaders, and each side has their own copy of the treaty, provided at the signing by the Galactic Mediation Council, translated into your respective languages. Correct, Cross rumbled, and the Zephrons violated it within the first year. We did not. Zarina slammed her hand on the table, cracking it slightly. The treaty gave us rights to the northern resources. You invaded our territory. The treaty gave us shared access to develop, not destroy. That is what it says. We were supposed to. Marcos raised one hand. Both leaders, somehow, stopped talking. Perhaps it was the absolute calm in his expression. Perhaps it was that he looked genuinely curious rather than judgmental. Perhaps it was that they were both, deep down, exhausted. General Cross, Marcus said quietly. Please show me your copy of the treaty. Article 7, paragraph 3. Cross pulled it up on his datapad, projecting it above the table. The text glowed in holographic letters. Marcus nodded. Chancellor Zarina, same section, please. Zarina's version appeared beside it. Same section. Same paragraph. Almost the same words. Marcus stood up, walking around the table slowly, examining both projections. The room held its breath. Even the guards stopped fidgeting. Interesting, Marcus murmured. Very interesting. What? Cross demanded. What is interesting? They are different. Their version justifies their illegal actions. No, Zarina snapped. Your version is the forgery. Obviously, you altered it to excuse your aggression. We did no such. Marcus laughed, just burst out laughing, a genuine sound of surprised delight that was so inappropriate for the situation that everyone stared at him. Sorry, he gasped, wiping his eyes. It is just, this is perfect. Terrible, tragic, but perfect. Explain yourself. Monk, Serena's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. Before I decide peace is not worth your death. Marcus turned to face them both, and his expression was now serious. Tell me, do either of you read Old Galactic Standard, the language this treaty was originally written in before translation? Both leaders exchanged glances. No, Cross admitted. That is why we requested translations. Right. Translations. Marcus pulled up both versions again, side by side. Cross, your version says partnership and resource distribution. Zarina, yours says partnership and resource destruction. That is the violation, both leaders said simultaneously, then glared at each other again. Marcus zoomed in on one word, just one word in the middle of the phrase. This, he said softly, pointing, is not a different word. It is the same word, with one tiny, microscopic difference. He highlighted a single accent mark, a diacritical that appeared above one letter in one version and below it in the other. The room went absolutely silent. In Old Galactic Standard, Marcus continued, his voice gentle now, like explaining something to children who had just broken something precious. This accent mark changes everything. Above the letter, it means distribution. Below the letter, it means destruction. The difference is about 0.5 millimeter. And someone, somewhere, 47 years ago, made a copy error. General Cross's face went through several colors, none of them healthy. High Chancellor Zarino's crystalline features seemed dim, the light inside her fading. You are saying, Cross whispered, that this entire war, was a typo? Marcus finished. A glorified autocorrect failure. One exhausted scribe, working late, making copies for different delegations, put the accent mark in the wrong spot on one version. The datapads projected the words. That tiny mark, that infinitesimal difference that had cost thousands of lives. 47 years, Zarina said, her voice hollow. 3 generations of my people, my own children. My soldiers, Cross added, sinking into his chair. My friends. My ... Marcus sat down between them. The war happened because nobody thought to compare originals with a neutral linguist. Both sides were so certain they were right, so convinced the other had fabricated their version, that nobody stopped to check the most basic thing, whether you were even disagreeing about the same words. Torin made a sound like a dying animal. Vexler just stared at the projections, his scales cycling through colors that did not have names. Marcus looked at both leaders, at the weight settling on their shoulders, at the realization of cosmic absurdity meeting human tragedy. I believe, he said quietly, that the word you both need now is proofread. It is what you should have done then. It is what I did. And it is what I recommend for any future treaties. The bunker was silent except for the distant sounds of a war that no longer had a reason. Part 4. The most expensive typo in galactic history, General. Cross sat staring at the holographic text like it was a bomb that had already detonated. The shrapnel, just taken 47 years to arrive. His hands, massive and scarred from decades of combat, trembled slightly as they rested on the table. A typo, he repeated, testing the word like it was a foreign substance. A single mark, 0.5 millimeter. The most expensive 0.5 millimeter in galactic history. Marcus agreed, pouring more terrible tea that nobody was drinking. I did the math on the transport here. If we account for military expenditure, infrastructure damage, lost economic productivity, and medical costs, this particular accent mark has cost approximately 4 trillion credits per millimeter. Really quite impressive when you think about it. I'm going to be sick, Zarina said, and she actually did look ill, her crystalline form flickering like a bad connection. My granddaughter died in the Battle of Red Valley. She was 17. She died for a punctuation error. The guards on both sides had lowered their weapons, not out of peace, but out of sheer existential confusion. You could not stay angry at an enemy when the enemy was not an enemy, but a victim of the same cosmic clerical error. Vexler finally found his voice. How did this even happen? There were officials, mediators, entire departments dedicated to making sure treaties were accurate. Marcus pulled up another screen, this one showing the original treaty signing from 47 years ago. The grainy footage showed tired diplomats, bored functionaries, everyone clearly wanting to finish and go home after months of negotiations. There, Marcus pointed. See that Quilian scribe in the corner? Working on the 4th copy machine that kept jamming. 3rd shift, 18th hour of work, running on stimulants and desperation. He zoomed in on the alien's face, the exhaustion evident even across species. That is your villain. Not malice, not conspiracy. Just someone very, very tired, making one very, very small mistake. This cannot be real, Kraz said, but his voice lacked conviction. The Galactic Council would have caught this. Someone would have noticed. The Galactic Council, Marcus said, pulling up more documents, processed 47 treaty signings. That month alone, they were understaffed, overworked, and apparently not very good at proofreading. Both your governments received your copies, read them, and assumed they were correct, because why would they not be? And then, when you disagreed about implementation, you assumed the other side was lying because that made more sense than a clerical error. He brought up the timeline, battle by battle, each one traced back to this single misunderstanding. The first skirmish of the Northern Territories. Krellians thought they were meant to distribute resources. Safrans thought the Krellians were destroying them. Both sides reacted accordingly. Then it escalated. Revenge, attacks, retaliation, pride, honor, fear, all the usual accelerants of war. Torin had slid down the wall, sitting on the floor, his weapon forgotten. We lost 3 battalions. At Northern Territories, I personally wrote letters to 200 families explaining why their loved ones died, heroically, defending a principle that did not exist. Marcus walked to the wall screen, pulling up a split image. This is what the treaty was supposed to say in plain language. Both parties agree to work together in distributing resources from shared territories for mutual benefit. Simple, clear, collaborative. He gestured to the two versions. This is what you each thought it said. Cross thought it meant you work together to distribute resources. Serena thought it meant you work together to destroy them, violating the agreement immediately. Neither was right. Neither was wrong. Both were victims of bad typography. I want to kill something, Serena said quietly. I have spent my entire adult life fighting this war. My entire political career is built on standing firm against Krellian aggression. And you are telling me there was no aggression? Oh, there was plenty of aggression, Marcus corrected. Just turn about what you thought. You were aggressively defending against a threat that did not exist. And Krass was aggressively prosecuting a war against treaty violators who had not actually violated anything. Krass stood up, paced, his armor creaking. My people will never believe this. Do you understand? They will think it is a trick, a human trick. They will say you are lying to weaken our resolve. Same with my people, Serena added, her voice bitter. We have decades of propaganda. Memorials to the honored dead, educational programs, teaching children why Krellians are existential threats. How do we explain that it was all based on where someone put a tiny mark on a letter? Marcus looked at them both, and for the first time since arriving, his expression was not calm or amused. It was tired. Ancient tired, the kind of tired that comes from seeing humanity make the same mistakes over and over across centuries. You tell them the truth, he said simply. You tell them that war is often started by the most absurd things, that pride and certainty can blind entire civilizations, that sometimes the bravest thing is not fighting but admitting you are wrong. They will riot, Cross said. Probably, Marcus agreed. Better than continuing to die, though. Yes. Serena laughed, a sharp, crystalline sound with no humor in it. A human monk has ended our war by teaching us to read properly. The irony is actually painful. The word Vexler said from the doorway, understanding finally clicking. You said you would end the war with a single word. Proofread. That was the word. That was the word, Marcus confirmed, though technically I used several words to explain it. But yes, proofread, the most powerful word in galactic diplomacy, apparently. Who knew? Cross and Serena looked at each other, really looked at each other for the first time in decades. Without the filter of hatred and assumptions, they saw the same exhaustion, desamelos, the same dawning horror at wasted time and wasted lives. I do not forgive you, Krass said slowly, because there is nothing to forgive. You did nothing wrong. Neither did you, Serena replied, her voice cracking. We were both right. And both wrong, and both idiots. Welcome to the human condition, Marcus said, raising his cup of terrible tea. We have been doing this for millennia. You get used to it. Sort of. Not really. The two leaders stood, facing each other across the table where an accent mark had killed thousands. We should probably write some actual peace terms, Serena sighed. That will not take long, Cross replied. We never actually disagreed on policy, just on what we thought the policy was. Marcus smiled a real smile this time, small and sad and somehow hopeful. See? You are getting the hang of it already. Just remember, from now on, always check your spelling, your grammar, your punctuation, and maybe hire better proofreaders. The galaxy's most expensive lesson in literacy, Torin muttered from the floor. Better to learn it now, Marcus said, than in another 47 years. Writing peace terms between two sides who technically had never actually been in disagreement about policy turned out to be the fastest negotiation in recorded history. 20 minutes. That was Italiano. 20 minutes to solve what 4 decades of violence could not. So we agree on resource distribution rights, Cross asked, reading from the datapad. Yes, obviously, Serena replied. We always agreed on that. We just thought you were destroying them, right? And joint development of infrastructure. Yes, That was literally what we wanted from the beginning. Trade regulations, fair and balanced as originally intended. Territorial boundaries, unchanged from the pre-war maps. Marcus sat between them, watching this surreal ping-pong of agreement with growing amusement. Wexler had his head in his hands, making sounds that might have been laughter or crying or both. "This is insane," the commander muttered. "We have been fighting over nothing." "Not nothing," Marcus corrected gently. "You were fighting over a misunderstanding so profound that it felt like betrayal. That is actually worse than nothing. Nothing you can dismiss. Perceived betrayal you take personally." Torin had recovered enough to stand, though he was leaning heavily against the wall. "Commander, permission to have an existential crisis." "Denied? We need you functional for at least another hour. Then you can fall apart on your own time." "Appreciated, sir." The actual hard part, they were discovering, was not the peace terms. It was figuring out how to explain this to everyone else. "My government is going to demand proof," Zarina said, pulling up communication protocols. "Extensive proof. They will want linguists, historians, independent verification." "Mine too," Cross agreed. "And even with proof, there will be factions who refuse to believe it. War has momentum. Economic momentum, political momentum. People have built careers on this conflict." Marcus nodded. "The military-industrial complex does not like losing revenue streams. Tale as old as time, or at least as old as the invention of currency and professional armies. You will have resistance." "So, what do we do?" Zarina asked, and there was genuine uncertainty in her voice. A leader who had been certain of her enemy for decades now adrift without that anchor. "You do what humans do when faced with monumental stupidity," Marcus said, standing up and walking to the room's communication terminal. "You own it completely. No hedging. No political spin. Just brutal, embarrassing honesty." He activated the terminal, setting it to broadcast on all frequencies to both Krellian and Zephyron territories. "What are you doing, Cross?" Demanded. "Helping." Marcus stepped aside. "You two are going to make a joint statement, right now. Together. Explaining exactly what happened, how it happened, and what you are doing to fix it. You are going to look foolish. You are going to sound absurd. People will mock you. But they will also hear that their leaders are unified in admitting a mistake, which is shockingly rare in galactic politics." Zarina and Cross looked at each other. Some silent communication passed between them, the kind that happens between people who have been enemies so long they understand each other better than friends. "Together?" Zarina asked. "Together," Cross confirmed. They stood in front of the camera, two leaders of warring factions, shoulder to shoulder for the first time in living memory. Marcus hit record. "Citizens of Krell and Zephyros," Cross began, his voice steady, despite everything. "We have news regarding the war. Important news. The war is over," Zarina continued. "Not because either side won, not because one side surrendered, but because the war should never have started." They proceeded to explain, in clear and painful detail, the typo, the accent mark, the 47 years of death over a clerical error. They did not soften it, did not blame subordinates or foreign powers, just explained the truth with all its ridiculous tragedy intact. When they finished, there was silence. Then the communication channels exploded. Messages poured in from both sides. Disbelief, anger, confusion, relief, grief, rage. All the emotions of a population, suddenly confronting cosmic absurdity. "Well," Torin said, watching the flood of incoming transmissions that went about as well as expected. "Give it time," Marcus advised. "Humans have a saying, the truth will set you free, but first, it will make you miserable." This is the miserable part. Over the next hours, as news spread, something strange happened. The fighting stopped. Not everywhere. Not immediately, but bit by bit, Soldiers on both sides put down weapons and just stared at each other across no man's land, trying to process that they had been trying to kill people who agreed with them. Wexler's communication device lit up with reports from the front lines. Sir, multiple units are requesting ceasefire orders. They are asking if the statement is real. Tell them yes, Cross said heavily, and tell them to come home. Zarina was receiving similar messages. My generals want to know if this is a Krellian trick. Tell them it is a human trick, Marcus suggested. We are very good at pointing out when everyone else is being ridiculous. The monuments started appearing within days. Grassroots efforts from both populations, not official government installations. Giant versions of the treaty, with both versions side by side. The accent mark highlighted in colors visible from orbit. The inscription below read, in both languages, "Let this never happen again." Proofread your damn treaties. Marcus stood with Wexler and Torin at the dedication of the first monument, watching his former enemies stood together, many crying, some angry, all processing. You know, Wexler said quietly, I lost my brother in this war 15 years ago. Died thinking he was defending our way of life from existential threats. I am sorry, Marcus said, and meant it, do not be. He died believing something that mattered. Finding out it did not matter does not change that he mattered. Wexler looked at the monk, but I would appreciate it if your species could stop making us all look like fools. We are not making you look like fools, Marcus replied. We are just very experienced at recognizing foolishness, having done so much of it ourselves. Gives us perspective. Torin laughed, the first genuine laugh Marcus had heard from him. The human approach to diplomacy. Been there, done that. Learned the hard way. Here to help. Essentially, yes. The celebration continued into the night. Awkward and painful and somehow hopeful. Zarina and Krovs worked together on joint governance proposals. Populations that had hated each other discovered they had more in common than they thought. Children from both sides played together for the first time in living memory. Unknowingly revolutionary. And Marcus watched it all with the quiet satisfaction of someone who had done a job well, despite everyone thinking he was insane. His communication device buzzed. A message from Earth. From the monastery. Brother Marcos, excellent work on Krell 9. We have another assignment for you. The Tar-Lexian-Gorduvian conflict. They have been at war for 80 years, over disputed holy sites. Please, proceed immediately. Marcus read the message. Sighed. Put the device away. More peace to make, Wexler asked. Always, Marcus replied. The galaxy is apparently very bad at talking to itself. Will you be all right? Marcus smiled, that same calm smile from when he first arrived. I was trained by people who threw pineapples at my head. I think I can handle intergalactic diplomacy. The pineapple training suddenly makes sense, Torin observed. Does it, though? Marcus asked philosophically. Does it really? Nobody had a good answer for that. 3 weeks later, Krell 9 had transformed from a war-torn nightmare into something resembling functional civilization, having a slightly awkward first date with peace. The celebration ceremony was scheduled in what used to be a demilitarized zone and was now a park. Because apparently, when you stop bombing things, nature has opinions about reclaiming territory. Marcus stood on the stage watching former enemies set up decorations together with the kind of determined cooperation that happens when everyone is trying very hard to make something work, despite the sheer weirdness of the situation. You look uncomfortable, Wexler observed, joining him. The commander's scales were a pleasant blue now, which apparently meant contentment, or possibly indigestion. Marcus had not fully mastered Krellian color theory. I disliked being the center of attention, Marcus admitted. Monastery training emphasizes humility. Also, someone put my face on commemorative mugs. Multiple designs. It is deeply unsettling. You ended a 47-year war by teaching adults to read properly. You are going to be on mugs. Possibly also t-shirt. Definitely stamps. This is my nightmare. The ceremony began with all the pomp that two civilizations could muster when trying to celebrate not killing each other anymore. Speeches were made. Hands and appendages were shaken. Children from both species released doves, which was symbolic even though neither species had any cultural connection to doves, and the birds looked deeply confused about their role in interspecies diplomacy. Marcus was called to the podium. He approached it the way someone might approach an execution, which, given the circumstances, was darkly ironic. "I have been asked to say a few words," he began, looking out at the crowd of thousands. "I will keep this brief, because I know you are all here for the food, not philosophy." That got a laugh. Good humor was healing. What happened here was tragic and absurd in equal measure. You lost people you loved over a mistake that never should have happened, and I cannot give you those people back. I cannot give you those years back. What I can do is remind you of something humans learned the hard way over many centuries of being catastrophically bad at communication. He paused, making sure everyone was listening. Always read what you sign. Always check your facts. Always verify your assumptions. And most importantly, always remember that the person you think is your enemy might actually just be someone who read a different version of the same memo, more laughter but thoughtful now. You are building something new here. Something better. A partnership based on actual communication rather than assumed betrayal. That is rare in the galaxy. Treasure it. Protect it. And please, for the love of all that is holy, hire better proofreaders. The crowd erupted in applause. Marcus stepped down quickly, before anyone could make him stay longer. The monument was unveiled next, a massive structure of metal and crystal showing both versions of the treaty. The accent mark, enlarged to the size of a person, impossible to miss. The plaque read, "The most expensive typo in history. Never again." Torin had tears in his eyes. It is perfect. Humiliating and perfect. The best monuments are, Marcus observed. Zarena and Crow stood together at the base of the monument, shaking hands for the cameras. They had formed an unlikely friendship, bonded by shared trauma and the mutual understanding that they had both been magnificent idiots. "Next month, we are starting joint language education programs," Zarena announced. "Every child will learn both Krelian and Zephron, plus Old Galactic Standard. We are calling it the Marcus Curriculum." "Please do not," Marcus said. But nobody was listening. "And we are establishing the Institute of Treaty Verification," Cross added. "Every legal document will be reviewed by linguists from at least 3 species before implementation. We are also calling it the Marcus Institute. I am begging you to stop naming things after me." "Too late," Wexler said cheerfully. "There is already a Marcus Memorial Library, the Marcus School of Diplomacy, and someone proposed Marcus Day as a planetary holiday. I'm leaving this planet immediately." But he was smiling. Despite everything, despite the discomfort and the unwanted fame, he was smiling because it had worked. The impossible had become possible. Peace had replaced war. Understanding had replaced hatred, all because someone finally bothered to check the fine print. His communication device buzzed. The monastery again. The Galaxian Gorduvian assignment. 80 years of war over holy sites that both sides claimed divine right to control. Marcus read the briefing. Siga deeply looked at the celebrating crowds one last time. "You are leaving," Torin said. It was not a question. There is another war. Another misunderstanding. Probably, someone has to go see if they are fighting over something real or another clerical error. What if it is real this time? What if they actually have legitimate grievances? Then I will help them negotiate those. But first, I need to make sure they are even disagreeing about the same thing. You would be surprised how often they are not. Wexler stepped forward, holding something. A data pad. We took a collection. Every soldier from both armies who survived contributed. This is for your monastery. For training more monks. The galaxy apparently needs them. Marcus took the pad, looked at the amount, and nearly dropped it. This is enough to fund the monastery for a decade. We know. We are hoping you train at least a dozen more like you. The galaxy is very large and very stupid. We need all the help we can get. The farewell was quick. Marcus was not good with goodbyes, and everyone seemed to understand that. He boarded his transport with just his robes and his walking stick, exactly as he had arrived. Except now, people actually understood why Earth had sent someone so apparently unprepared. As the ship lifted off, Marcus looked down at Krell 9, at the city's rebuilding, at the monuments to absurdity and hope, at two civilizations, learning to be neighbors instead of enemies. His communication device lit up again. Not the monastery this time. The Galactic Council. They wanted to hire him as an official mediator. Permanent position. Excellent salary. Full diplomatic immunity. Marcus deleted the message. The monastery paid nothing, demanded everything, and threw fruit at people. But it was home, and it understood that sometimes the best way to help was not through official channels and bureaucratic authority, but through one stubborn monk with a wooden stick and an annoying habit of asking obvious questions nobody else thought to ask. The transport jumped to faster-than-light travel, and Krell 9 vanished behind them. In his bag, Marcus had already begun reading the Tarlexian-Gorduvian briefing materials. 80 years of war. Hundreds of thousands. Dead. Ancient holy sites claimed by both sides based on religious texts and historical precedent. He pulled up the original texts, started comparing translations, languages, contexts. 3 hours later, he found it. Not a typo this time, a mistranslation. The word that both sides translated as exclusive ownership actually meant shared stewardship in the original ancient language. Nobody had bothered to check because the translators had been from a species that did not have a concept of shared religious spaces. Marcus put his head in his hands and laughed. Laughed until tears came. Because of course, it was another linguistic error. The galaxy was not actively malicious. It was just catastrophically bad at communication and too proud to admit it might be wrong. He began drafting his approach. First, verify the texts. Second, find neutral linguists. Third, get both sides in a room. Fourth, prepare for death threats. When he pointed out they had been killing each other over a translation error. Standard procedure, really. His device buzzed again. Another message from the monastery. Brother Marcus, after the Tarlexian-Gorduvian situation, we have 17 more conflicts, requesting your assistance. Also, the council has declared you persona non grata in 3 systems for making their diplomats look incompetent. Excellent work. Father Matthias sends his regards and reminds you that pride is a sin. Please remember to be humble about making the entire galaxy look foolish. Marcus smiled, typed back a response. Tell Father Matthias I am being very humble. Also, please send more tea. The alien varieties are universally terrible. And perhaps upgrade the pineapple launchers. I hear the Gorduvians have excellent aim. Would be ashamed to get rusty. He settled back in his seat. The briefing materials spread around him, already working on the next impossible piece. The next absurd revelation. The next moment when he would have to explain to powerful beings that they had been wrong about something fundamental for longer than he had been alive. It was exhausting work. It was infuriating work. It was dangerous work. It was also the most important work in the galaxy. Because someone had to teach the stars to proofread. Someone had to ask the obvious questions. Someone had to be willing to stand in the middle of a war zone with nothing but robes and audacity. And point out that maybe, just maybe, everyone was being a bit silly. Might as well be a human monk with a walking stick and a mysterious immunity to both death and embarrassment. The monastery trained its people well, even if the training did involve an unreasonable amount of fruit-based violence. Marcus closed his eyes, meditated as the ship traveled between stars, and prepared himself for the next war that probably should not have been a war at all. Somewhere behind him, Krell 9 celebrated peace. Somewhere ahead of him, other worlds prepared for a strange human who would either save them or drive them completely insane. Possibly both. Probably both. Definitely both. The galaxy, Marcus reflected peacefully, was going to need a lot more monks, and significantly better proofreaders. But mostly monks.